Every generation of American students sits in a classroom and learns the same story, a story of brave founding fathers, manifest destiny, and the land of the free. But history, real history, is never that clean. Behind every triumph, there are stories buried, stories of injustice, of betrayal, of decisions that shaped this nation in ways most people never knew. Today, we're going to talk about those stories, not to tear America down, but because the truth is the only foundation worth building on. This is the dark side of American history, and it's time you knew. June 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma. In the Greenwood district, there was a neighborhood so prosperous, so vibrant, that people called it Black Wall Street. African-American-owned hotels, newspapers, law offices, theaters, over 300 businesses thriving in 1 square mile. Then, in a matter of 18 hours, it was gone. A young black man named Dick Rowland was accused of assaulting a white elevator operator, charges that were almost certainly false. By the next morning, a white mob, some of them deputized by the local government, descended on Greenwood. They burned homes, they shot residents in the streets. Some accounts, and this is documented, describe private planes firing shots and dropping incendiary devices on the neighborhood from above. By the time it ended, over 300 Black Americans were dead. More than 10,000 were left homeless. 35 blocks of the most prosperous Black community in America had been reduced to ash. And for decades, this event was scrubbed from Oklahoma's history books. No official investigation, no reparations, no acknowledgement. Most Americans didn't learn about the Tulsa Race Massacre until HBO's Watchmen series aired in 2019. A fictional TV show had to remind people of a real historical atrocity. Think about that. December 7, 1941, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. Fear swept the nation, and fear, as history has shown again and again, makes people do terrible things. In February 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the same president celebrated for the New Deal, signed Executive Order 9066. With the stroke of a pen, over 120,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly removed from their homes and sent to internment camps. Not Japanese nationals, American citizens, men, women, and children who had built lives in this country, some of whose families had been here for generations. They were given days to sell everything they owned, farms, businesses, homes, sold for pennies or simply abandoned. Then they were relocated to remote, desolate camps surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. And here's what's rarely mentioned. There was no evidence of espionage, no plots uncovered, no credible threat that justified any of this. The Supreme Court upheld it in 1944 in Korematsu versus United States, a ruling it didn't formally repudiate until 2018. In 1988, the U.S. government finally apologized and paid $20,000 to surviving internees. For many, it came too late. And yet, most American students can name the internment, but can't tell you what it actually felt like, can't name a single family that went through it. History without humanity isn't history, it's just dates. Long before 1942, long before 1921, there was another forced removal. 1830, President Andrew Jackson, whose face appears on the $20 bill to this day, signed the Indian Removal Act. It forced the 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Muskogee, Seminole, Chickasaw, and Choctaw, off their ancestral lands in the southeast to make room for white settlers and cotton plantations. The Cherokee Nation took it to the Supreme Court and won. Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that Georgia had no authority over their lands. Andrew Jackson's response? He ignored the ruling entirely. What followed was one of the most devastating forced marches in American history. Thousands of Native Americans were made to walk hundreds of miles through brutal winter conditions, inadequate food, no shelter, disease spreading through camps with no medical care. Estimates suggest that between 4,000 and 8,000 Cherokee alone died on what they called Anunna Dal Tsuni, the path where they cried, the trail of tears. And this wasn't some accident of history. It was a calculated government policy, official, organized, signed into law. The next time you see Jackson on your $20 bill, remember what he actually did. Most people know that J. Edgar Hoover ran the FBI for nearly 50 years. Fewer people know what he actually did with that power. In 1956 to 1971, the FBI ran a secret program called COINTELPRO, the Counterintelligence Program. Its stated goal was to disrupt, discredit, and neutralize what the FBI called domestic threats. In practice, it was a coordinated campaign against the civil rights movement. The FBI wiretapped Martin Luther King Jr.'s phones, surveilled his every movement, and sent him an anonymous letter urging him to commit suicide, calling him a fraud, and threatening to release embarrassing personal information. Let that sink in. The United States government, using taxpayer money, sent the most prominent civil rights leader in history a letter encouraging him to kill himself. COINTELPRO also targeted Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party, and the American Indian Movement. The FBI planted informants, spread disinformation, and worked to create internal conflicts within these organizations. Fred Hampton, the 21-year-old chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party, was killed in a 1969 raid by Chicago police, a raid coordinated with the FBI. He was shot while he slept. In 1976, a Senate investigation confirmed all of this. It was real. It was documented. The government admitted it. But it barely makes it into standard history curricula. And if it does, it's a footnote, not the chapter it deserves. Trust is fragile, and once the government breaks it, especially with communities it has already wronged, that damage lasts generations. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service launched a study in Macon County, Alabama. They recruited 399 black men who had syphilis and 201 who did not. The men were told they were receiving treatment for bad blood, a local term for various ailments. They were not receiving treatment. They were being observed. The researchers wanted to study the natural progression of untreated syphilis in black men. And when penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis in the 1940s, the men were deliberately kept from receiving it. The study continued for 40 years. 40 years. By the time a whistleblower ended it in 1972, 28 men died directly from syphilis. Over 100 died from related complications. 40 wives were infected. 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. The men who survived received a $10 million settlement in 1974. No one was ever prosecuted. The Tuskegee study is not just a medical ethics case study. It is a direct reason why distrust of the medical system, particularly among Black Americans, runs so deep. That distrust has real consequences today. It affects vaccine uptake, clinical trial participation, and health outcomes. History has a long reach.
Here's one most people genuinely don't know. Before Nazi Germany adopted eugenics, the pseudoscientific belief that humanity could be improved by controlling who could reproduce, America pioneered it. By the 1930s, 32 U.S. states had enacted forced sterilization laws. Tens of thousands of Americans deemed unfit by the government were sterilized without their consent. This included people with disabilities, the mentally ill, the poor, immigrants, and, disproportionately, people of color. In 1927, the Supreme Court upheld forced sterilization in Buck v. Bell. Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the majority opinion, which included the line, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough." That ruling has never been formally overturned. American eugenicists were celebrated. Their work was funded by some of the most prominent families in the country, and their ideas directly influenced the policies adopted by Nazi Germany, something Nazi scientists themselves acknowledged at the Nuremberg trials. This is not ancient history. The last known forced sterilizations in American prisons were reported as recently as 2010. So why does any of this matter? Because countries, like people, cannot heal from wounds they refuse to acknowledge. The purpose of studying this history isn't guilt, it isn't self-loathing, it's clarity. It's understanding how systems of power operate, who they protect and who they harm, so that we can build something better. Every one of these events, Tulsa, internment, the Trail of Tears, COINTELPRO, Tuskegee, eugenics, was known to the people in power at the time. Some were celebrated, most were covered up. All of them shaped the America we live in today. The students who learn this history, who sit with its discomfort and ask hard questions, they're the ones who actually understand what "we the people" has always meant and what it still could mean. This was the dark side of American history. If this video made you think, share it, leave a comment about which story surprised you most, and subscribe if you want more real history, not the sanitized version. We'll see you in the next one.